sound. I jinxed myself immediately. Okay. So you should be able to see it. I'll hit play, and here we go.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our presentation on AmpleOrganics Road to HashiCorp Nomad. My name is Glenn, and I have with me my colleague Kevin.
Nice to meet you.
So here's me in a nutshell. My name is Glen Yu. I'm the cloud architect at AmpleOrganics, but I wear multiple hats. And speaking of hats, I'm barely seen in the wild without one. In terms of tech, I'm pretty old school in some ways. I prefer VI or Vim over IDEs and spaces over tabs. Throughout my career, I've worked across different industries, ranging from the government to animation VFX to retail and banking, and now compliance software in a startup that is AmpleOrganics. I am an ML and TensorFlow enthusiast. So in my spare time, I like to play around with that and with picture recognition and object recognition. And here's Kevin.
Hi, everyone. My name's Kevin Tawish-Jurna. I work as a technical lead at AmpleOrganics. On my spare time, I enjoy playing video games or skiing. I think IDEs are a bit greater than Vim. However, I agree with Glenn that spaces are greater than tabs. And in terms of tech that I like to work on, it kind of changes every week. I like to experiment a lot. So what is AmpleOrganics? AmpleOrganics is a software company building compliance solutions to support businesses, which we call licensed producers, here in Canada and Canada's highly regulated cannabis industry. Essentially, Ample provides a SaaS product that tracks everything from seed to sale. In July 2020, Ample was acquired by Akerna, which is a cannabis tech company operating out of the US, which goals align similar to Ample's. Together, the goal of Akerna is to become the leading provider of cannabis solutions in the world. However, today we're going to focus on AmpleOrganics and our integration with Nomad. Our product, just a reminder, our product is software, so please do not email Glenn or I asking for free samples. So in the beginning of Ample, our product ran almost as an on-prem appliance. We would ship a server to a client's facilities, and on it we'd run a hypervisor, which would run Linux and database servers on those on-premise servers. These appliances were managed centrally from Ample's headquarters via Chef. One of the issues with this setup is that we had no control over the underlying network or infrastructure on which the application sits, and this sometimes would lead to small outages and instability in our app. Some of our earliest and oldest clients still operate on this model, although we've since replaced Chef in favor of Ansible. So with these issues in mind, and as our business got better, we needed better ways to scale and to manage our growth. We transitioned towards a SaaS model that was hosted on AWS. Kubernetes was chosen to be the orchestrator, and it was intended to solve our scaling and management issues. The Kubernetes clusters we deployed were self-built and self-managed. We had a multi-tenanted non-prod cluster that our clients would use for training staff, testing new releases, or other activities that weren't necessarily appropriate for production. On our production systems, we had large amount of single tenant clusters, essentially one per client. Apart from Kubernetes, or our Kubernetes setup, we used Helm to make our deployments easier and HashiCorp Vault for our secrets. At this point, I bet a bunch of you may be thinking, well, why is prod a bunch of single tenant clusters instead of a single multi-tenant cluster, similar to what your non-prod structure is? You would be right to notice that, and there's a very good reason why it was designed that way originally. However, I can't get into that here for the sake of time and the focus of this talk. All I can say though is that it was a necessary evil at the time, and with about a dozen clients on the SaaS model, it wasn't showing the issues as severely at that point. Now I'll pass it on to Glenn to go into why Kubernetes wasn't working for Ample and the path towards Nomad.
Thanks, Kevin. So why did our Kubernetes not work? Basically, what drove us to reevaluate the solution that we had? The biggest reason why we had a bunch of single tenant clusters for prod was they had additional requirements that weren't present in our non-prod environment. And to implement a multi-tenanted solution would not be cost effective unless we hit a critical mass in the number of clients that we had. The inflection point, however, came in the form of recreational cannabis being legalized in Canada in late 2018. It was already a rapidly growing industry, and when that hit, in the months following, we went from about a dozen clients or so on Kubernetes to 80 or 90, and that's when we kind of really saw some of our issues. Management is a big one, and this goes hand in hand with the scalability issue. We now have to manage all the different Kubernetes contexts and all the users and access perms that go with it. Third is complexity. Now, if you've ever tried Kelsey Hightower's Kubernetes the hard way, you'd know that there's a lot that goes into manually building and configuring a Kubernetes cluster. With Nomad, it's just one binary and two configuration files, one for the client or agent or client, and if it was a server, an additional configuration file with server-specific settings. The last point is support, and this was a big one because our Kubernetes clusters were self-built and self-managed. We didn't have any proper enterprise support. So if something were to happen and the cause wasn't apparent, we basically had to Google GitHub issues or Stack Overflow for answers and pray that someone had already encountered whatever problem we were facing. Well, you might ask, well, if you're on AWS, then why not use EKS? And that's also a very valid question because AmpleOrganics initially served medical marijuana license producers. A lot of our clients had patients as their clients. So some of the data contained patient health info, and that type of data needs to stay within the Canadian borders. AWS's Canada region didn't get the option of having a managed Kubernetes service until much, much later. 1.5 years later, in fact, compared to our neighbors south of the border. Now, I would like to point out here that the first 2 points were no fault of Kubernetes, and was entirely due to how the solution was initially designed. This would be something that we address with an entire redesign of our network that, in itself is probably worthy of a small talk, but it isn't something that I will get into here. So you already know the solution we went with, but what did we consider? AWS ECS and HashiCorp Nomad were our frontrunners. We had very briefly considered Apache Mesos, or possibly even just holding out and hoping that they would announce that EKS would be GA in Canada at reInvent or something. But ultimately, they would be a bit risky and come with a lot, it would have a lot of unknowns. For ECS, I would classify the AWS ECS option as okay. It did a lot of things okay, but there weren't any particular features that made it stand out. Integration with third-party products wasn't so simple, so if we wanted something like service discovery, we would have to go use AWS Cloud Map or AWS Secrets Manager for secrets management. If we wanted something that would integrate easily with ECS. And all this kind of ties in with the first point I listed there, which is the lack of portability. If we went with ECS as the solution, and later decided to change cloud providers for for whatever reason, it would be very difficult to do so. And whatever work that we put into getting ECS up and running would have likely been wasted. HashiCorp products, on the other hand, are known for being cloud and vendor agnostic. And we were already using HashiCorp products such as Terraform and Vault in our day-to-day, which is working really well for us. So why should Nomad be any different? It turns out that we were right. It was easy to configure, easy to use, and easy to upgrade. And speaking of upgrades, it's so easy to upgrade compared to the laundry list of steps you would have to go through to try and upgrade a Kubernetes setup. It literally takes seconds to do this manually. Nomad also has this feature of cluster federation, which kind of intrigued us. Now, we don't have it implemented right now because it makes no sense to do that as there's only one Canadian region in AWS, but it was something we looked at as something that could help bolster our performance and make our setup more robust should additional regions ever open up. And when I was doing my research on what all our different options offered, I came across a pretty unique load balancing option that really helped solidify Nomad as being the winner. But I think this deserves a slide of its own, so I will get to that later. Okay, so I did my research and was in the process of planning out a PLC cluster to demo the capabilities and how it would solve some of our issues when our non-prod Kubernetes cluster suffered a catastrophic failure. At this point, we took a two-pronged approach. We had one of our engineers work to see if he can bring the Kubernetes cluster back to life, while I sprang into action in getting the PLC Nomad cluster going. And you know what? I got the PLC cluster up and running before we could figure out how to revive our non-prod Kubernetes cluster. So at that point, it kind of became pretty evident that the PLC was turning into our new non-prod cluster. And what happened was exactly what we had been fearing. Luckily, it wasn't in prod, but we took this as a sign, right? It's kind of like a serendipitous encounter in some cheesy romance movie plot, right? That this is meant to be. And after 4 or 5 months of running our new non-prod Nomad cluster very smoothly with no issues, we decided we would implement it in production as well to go along with our network redesign. And finally, in March of 2020, our production Nomad cluster was officially live. Now, I can't talk about having a Nomad cluster without talking about console because that's the glue that holds everything together. Nomad is able to focus on its job of workload orchestration so effortlessly because console is in the background managing the east-west traffic so seamlessly. And the big part of this is it does it with service discovery, which not only makes clustering very easy, but it's also what our load balancing solution relies on to know where to route the traffic. And of course, there's Vault, which we were already using for secrets management in our Kubernetes setup. So the only thing we had to do was integrate it with Nomad, and that was quite easily done as well. When I was looking into some of the load balancing solution options available from the Nomad site, there's your standard Nginx or HA proxy that I expected to see, but then there was also something called Fabio. It was something that I hadn't heard of before. But the more I read about it, the more it stood out to me because of how simple it was. All you have to do is run a Fabio container as a system service. A system service is essentially a daemon set in Kubernetes terms. And in lieu of a config file, it just requires a specific tag when registering a service with console that you want Fabio to handle the routing for. Fabio will create a routing table of all the healthy services, and then you just simply direct traffic to Fabio's port number, and Fabio will figure out for you where the traffic should go. It'll handle it all for you. So if you have a rat's nest of a Nginx config file right now for your reverse proxy solution, then you might want to consider looking into Fabio. It's also written in Go, so it's lightweight and fast. I won't go into details anymore, but if you want to geek out on some of the finer details of Fabio, I've included a YouTube link where you can learn all about it. So where are we today? Well, our Hashi stack is managed by a small team of 5. None of the 5 team members are dedicated resources towards managing it. It's the same 5 that handles the day-to-day for everything infrastructure related and sometimes beyond. We use a mix of self-service operations powered by Rundeck and Ansible to do automated deployments. And since implementing our Nomad cluster solution, all new clients have been deployed there. And currently about half of clients that were on Kubernetes have also been migrated to Nomad. Our goal is by the end of 2021, we aim to be completely off of Kubernetes. And we have support now as we're on the Nomad Enterprise license. It's one of those things that you rather have and not need than to need and not have. And I'm happy to say that it's been a year since we've been using Nomad in prod. 1.5 if you count non-prod, and we haven't had any issues with either of our clusters.
So here's 2 redacted screenshots of our non-prod cluster. These are very small relative to what we run in production, as those run on more resources and multiple instances of each. But what we wanted to show off is how Nomad has allowed developers like myself at Ample a simple but rich view of our clients' instances. Example of this is the bottom left, which you can see the topology feature that was introduced in version 1, and how you can get an at-a-glance view of our or your entire cluster, and how the workload is packed and distributed within each. I also want to show off ease of use features like on the right, you can see the ability to get into an exec shell and the running containers, provided that you have the right perms and ACLs, of course, from the UI, which can be very handy for developers based on what they require that for. And this comes with the double plus being browser and OS agnostic. Instead of needing the developers to use a command line tool or something, this allows them to use whatever systems they're using anyway, and you can provide it to all the developers as quickly as possible. Now I'll give it back to Glenn to give you some parting advice and wrap up this presentation.
Thanks, Kevin. So I'm going to end it with some advice to help ease your journey to Nomad if you're considering it. The first is, if you're not doing this already, try to avoid dashes or periods in your vault secret key names. Try to stick to underscores if you need a separator of some sort. Now, while both dashes and periods are valid characters to use as to use in the key names, the way that you would reference the secrets within the Nomad job spec is through Go templating. And the inability to parse those characters properly is really just the limitation of Go templating. But don't worry, if you've already been using dashes or periods, you won't have to redo all your secrets. There is a workaround. It just doesn't look as pretty or consistent if you have a mix of secret key names with underscores in them as well. My next piece of advice is not really Nomad specific, but if you don't already know, HashiCorp Learn has a lot of great tutorials and content, for all their product offerings. So I know I turned to it a lot when I was creating our first Nomad cluster 1.5 years ago, and the content on it has only gotten better since. And finally, just go for it. I mean, there's a sort of a elegance in the simplicity of the Hashi stack, and if you're a small shop or a startup like us, this translates into more free time to improve on other aspects of your infrastructure and security. Setting one up is easier than you think, so just give it a go. Thank you.
Thank you.